Hello and welcome. It's great to have you here today. We are streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you're a marketer or an entrepreneur who is determined to tell a story that sells, then boy, have I got a treat for you today. We're going to talk about how you can generate demand and accelerate sales pipeline with storytelling. We're going to teach you how to do this without you having to learn any specialist or confusing entertainment-based frameworks. That's right. And you know what I mean if you spent even 5 minutes exploring storytelling, because we won't be teaching you the hero's journey. We won't be teaching you the 7 types of story or Kurt Vonnegut's 8 tips. You get the point, right? You know that great storytelling can help your business, but it's hard to find time to become a master storyteller. And quite frankly, it's not your fault. Most of the storytelling advice that's out there is entertainment-based storytelling. And you simply don't have the time to become a master storyteller, but you do want to benefit from it. So what if I could help you by telling you there's one single thing that you could do that will help with all of that? That single thing is business storytelling. And my goal for this presentation is to help you, 2 types of people. You can fall into either one of these buckets, okay? So for the natural born storytellers amongst you today, we're going to show you how to take your whole company on the storytelling journey, ultimately resulting in increasing profitability with business storytelling. And for those of you who are utterly new to business storytelling or even storytelling in general, you will get some simple frameworks to get going with business storytelling today. So I'm really excited because in the next 60 minutes, my goal is to get you to believe that business storytelling is the key to unlock unrealized business opportunities. I'm going to show you my proprietary frameworks that will help make it simple for you to achieve that result, because it's all about results in business, right? As a marketer and entrepreneur myself, I know how much frustration there can be in business. For over 20 years in corporate America, I had a variety of marketing roles. I was even a chief storyteller for a business division of Microsoft. For years, and even as a passionate storyteller, I struggled to apply storytelling in business. There's a lot you're trying to manage on any given day, and you might just feel you don't have the time to fit storytelling into that. Well, we're going to change that today. You also might feel that you need to be focusing on every single marketing channel for fear that you will fail if you don't check all the marketing boxes. Or you might feel like you have to get on the latest social media platform every time one comes out. You don't. What you need to get right, however, is your business storytelling. Like many of you, I once thought that storytelling was reserved for movies, books, and theater. And whilst I've always appreciated good storytelling, my career was really built through science and technology. And, I didn't really think that stories had much to do with those fields at all. However, I did come to learn that storytelling really propped up everything in business, for every business, in every industry. Yes, communication and marketing, but even more than that. Internal alignment, employee motivation, even partnerships all rely on storytelling. Now, my mother was a scientist, a biologist focused on virology and zoology. She taught my sisters and me to ask questions, develop hypotheses, and test our ideas. We were taught to seek facts, data, and truth. But she was also a poet and an author. My father reinforced this, an electrical engineer who enjoyed a sales and marketing career spanning 5 decades in the high-tech industry, from the very beginning of the high-tech industry. He inadvertently indoctrinated me into the world of tech. Intel specifically at first. I grew up surrounded by tales of Silicon Valley. And by the way, I highly recommend Accidental Empires. It's a really fun read. We were soaked in story from a young age. Both my parents read to us voraciously. I still have fond memories of being curled up on the couch with my dad and one of my sisters as he read us The Lord of the Rings. And this is the actual copy, my mum's 1969 edition. It was actually the first time all the Lord of the Rings books were published together. And so I took that passion for science and followed my mother's footsteps into creative writing and my father's footsteps into technology when I started my career in Intel's marketing department. Any fans of Red Dwarf in the audience? This is a 2002 photograph from an Intel Counter-Strike gaming event that I helped manage at the Science Museum in London. And yes, that is Lister from Red Dwarf. In the early days of my career, I thought storytelling was best suited for presentations, for campaigns, and for messaging. I didn't explicitly see it as being something to use in other areas of the business. Something else I discovered in those early days was Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, a popular read at Intel and a popular concept. I loved how the concept framed this chasm, how businesses that failed to connect with the early majority would literally fall into the chasm. It became a North Star for me. If a business is nothing else, it's about connecting a product with the most lucrative of your potential markets. The early majority, that's right. So storytelling is about connecting people to ideas. And without realizing it, I started applying storytelling to my everyday work. In one early instance, I created a superhero theme for a partner account manager training event at Intel. In another, I created a James Bond style sales campaign. This was at Microsoft. Eventually, efforts such as these led to me being internally recruited as chief storyteller for Microsoft Dynamics. Just as I was planning on leaving the company. Not a lot of people actually know that. Wow, I was like, I had this offer to be chief storyteller. It was all official. I could finally get paid to tell stories. My finishing those novels could wait. But little did I realize that the journey I was about to embark on would actually result in me being able to help others unlock a big business secret. At Intel, a mentor of mine, Nick Drew, once said, always find if somebody has done it before. It'll save you time and energy. In other words, don't reinvent the wheel when you can avoid doing so. I've always kept that in mind and, as such, kept an eye out for existing approaches that I could leverage in my newly minted chief storyteller role. I sought to do that in a way that would really speed things up, and I got on the hunt for some existing wheels. But honestly, I struggled. I had turned down an external job offer to take this role, and I really had to make it work. I had a family of 4 at home to feed. People had been trying to apply storytelling to business as a way to cross the chasm for years, but there was a problem with how they were approaching it. Now, to be clear, there is some really interesting advice and stuff out there when it comes to storytelling. For example, I found tons of fascinating information and frameworks born out of hundreds of years of story crafting and literature and the movie industries. Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, for example, to name but one famous framework. Even Pixar had an approach. In my exploration, I also discovered useful approaches to help with improving presentations, like Nancy Duart's wonderful Resonate, and techniques for telling your personal story with impact, like Bo Eason's. As I dug into these various methods and classic storytelling models, I couldn't find the wheel that I was looking for. The available frameworks had been created for a different end goal. That end goal was entertainment. The hero's journey can be 10, 12, or even a whopping 17 steps, with phrases like rising and falling action and character arc and hook and inciting incident. There's just too much of a heavy lift for busy business professionals who don't want to become professional storytellers. So no matter how many rabbit holes I went down, I just couldn't find a storytelling wheel that worked for the repeatable application of storytelling for business, which is what I really wanted to do. As Chip and Dan Heath explain in their wonderful book, Made to Stick, we're all subject to the curse of knowledge. The curse makes it hard for people outside of an area of expertise, such as our area of expertise, to really understand things that we simply just get, right? What is effortless for us as an expert requires so much energy for a non-expert. And quite frankly, storytelling was no different. The wheels just weren't rolling. So I decided to focus on the essence of storytelling. I would use the entertainment frameworks and I would be a story interpreter. And I would focus on outside-in customer centricity, and I would focus on the customer as the hero on their journey to hopefully, ultimately purchase from us. Now, my team and I created some terrific customer showcase films that focused on the customer and that experience. And this only reinforced for me how powerful storytelling was. I was discovering more than ever that the power of story wasn't limited to just movies and to books. It's how we as humans are connected. And since business is still human to human, I realized that storytelling played an essential role in both internal and external business communications. I was experiencing storytelling's impact on business, but I felt like I was only just scratching the surface. And I wanted to go further than just injecting elements of story into traditional marketing models. I started to wonder what actual business storytelling wheels might look like. I was inspired to take my experience outside of my corporate role and start my own company, to put all that energy into helping lots of different businesses with storytelling. But I had a young family at home and my wife was on sabbatical from her career after the birth of our second child. Quitting wasn't an option. Everything changed on July the 19th, 2015. Tragedy struck. I received the phone call that no one ever wants. My parents had been killed in a car crash. You know, it took a long time for our family to come to terms with this, but I won't go into any more details of this sad tale. But the fact is that life is short, and it was never, ever more apparent to me. It was against this backdrop of this profound grief that I left Microsoft. What was I thinking? Well, I tapped into my inner resources that I've been gifted by my mother and father, creativity, technology, a love of storytelling, and I honored them in the best way I know how, helping others find success in their lives and business with the power of storytelling. That's why I formed Go Narrative. I started working on those business storytelling wheels, so you don't have to. It is true that I founded Go Narrative as a way for businesses to use the power of storytelling, because businesses, marketers, entrepreneurs are a creative bunch. And I know that when you use our frameworks, you can create amazing stories, amazing content, and amazing customer engagements. The problem with being driven and creative, however, as these entrepreneurs and marketers such as you and myself are, is that it can result in that sort of check every box syndrome or bright shiny object syndrome. Trust me, the last one in particular is something I'm subjected to daily. But the truth is you don't need to check all those boxes, including the latest fancy social media channels. What you need is better storytelling. What's a big misconception of storytelling? Well, that it is just for children, movies, and books. It's not. Those are just artifacts of what storytelling is really all about. And if some artifacts can be for pure entertainment, some can be for business engagement. And when you apply storytelling, your messaging is better. Your executives are more relatable. Your salespeople have increased confidence. You generate increased demand, and you accelerate your sales pipe velocity. And everything is more aligned. Sounds pretty good, right? I'd seen this power and I wanted to spread the word. But honestly, I found the entertainment frameworks pretty hard to apply to business. So I want to save you that hassle. Because of this, and even after the initial founding of Go Narrative, I relied on those existing frameworks. As I worked to decide to decode storytelling for business, I really prioritized the concept of a strategic messaging foundation, using the experience in value propositions, positioning, personas, customer journeys, and content marketing. And selling those things was a great place to start, and it got the business off the ground. But the crown jewel really was business storytelling. That's what I really wanted to unlock, not just for myself, but for you as well. Literature and film obviously benefited from things like the hero's journey, but they're just artifacts of what storytelling truly is. And I know that storytelling is more than just those journeys. I was determined to find an approach for business, not just for entertainment. And I knew storytelling was how we made sense of the world. And we want our customers to make sense of us, don't we? And you want your customer to make sense of you. So without those simple practical frameworks, however, I continue to play this role as interpreter. The more I practiced the art and science of storytelling, the more I realized storytelling was a value problem. And if business is about anything, right, it's about value and then connecting that value to people who can benefit from it. For our ancestors, the stories of value were told around the campfire, right? Value is things like which berries were edible, where the shelter was, or the fact there was wolves in the forest that would get the children if they wandered there at nighttime. Well, evolution did its thing and rewarded with survival the tribes that practice storytelling. Now, there are a few important things people get wrong when it comes to business storytelling. Let's have a look at what those are. There's 2 cardinal sins. The first one is not including people and their transformation in the story. This holds true even when story is short form content like a tweet or ad copy. It really needs to connect to a person in their transformation. I thought back to my time in corporate America. One time I was sitting in the audience, a crowd of employees, executive took the stage, corporate all hands meeting. "We have a great story," he called out. The crowd was buzzing. This executive had just been promoted to CMO, and the all hands was his moment. "I'll tell you what it is." The crowd leaned in. "Our products work great together. Our new SKUs and pricing are exactly what our customers need." What? I waited for a story. Nothing. This was the CMO. There was no story. The presentation wasn't structured around story. There were a few anecdotes. That was it. And this was only one example of where I was seeing the term story being abused. It was a product strategy or a marketing priority, not a story. Focus on logic and argument, and you inspire your audience to argue with you. Stories are about people and the overcoming of obstacles, about transformation. This is the why of storytelling. So what's that second sin? Not including a what, an element of value. It's the whole point of storytelling, to deliver valuable information, the head and the heart, not just about telling a nice, cutesy story. When you do include the head and the heart, your audience can act on the transformation to lead them to a better place or a better life. And they see that simulated for the first time in a story. When we hear a story, we simulate the events in our minds. It teaches us how to create similar real-world experiences. It shows us how life can be better. I love this quote from Jonathan Gottschall. "Fiction is an ancient virtual reality technology that specializes in solving human problems." But I was struggling to apply the common storytelling structures to business because they were entertainment structures, not business structures. So I continued playing this interpreter role while focusing on our strategic messaging foundation work. But the dream was real. What if I could focus on story frameworks specifically for business people? So my mother's earliest memory was actually of her grandfather taking her and her sisters down to the smithy. He was a blacksmith, and he helped my mother lift up the hammer and have it crashing down onto the molten metal, banging it, thrusting it into the water to temper it, putting it back in the flames, getting it hot and soft again, and banging it again. Sparks flew. It was a smoky room, and they were all told under pain of death not to tell their mother, my grandmother. Forging things takes work. It was through this experience that I forged these frameworks so that you don't have to. I found myself on a mission to find a way to simplify and unlock storytelling for business, to do so in a way that's really accessible. And I did it. I created a set of tools to enable business people to find success through storytelling. And here's the kicker: without relying on entertainment frameworks. Simple, accessible, and actionable. Memorizing a ton of stuff can be a heavy lift. It always makes me think back to university, my computer science and business degree. Lots of memorizing, right? 4 Ps, cash cows. And, there was a lot to learn. You've probably been there. You probably might even be there today. We have to remember so much for our jobs. We have to, all these plates that we need to spin, and then we have to keep them spinning, and it can be really tricky. Every time Twitter releases a new feature, I get anxious about not jumping on the bandwagon fast enough. And for ages, I tried to maintain a Go Narrative Instagram account before I cut my losses and decided to focus on Twitter and LinkedIn. But the struggle is real. And of course, there's a constant flow of new channels like TikTok and Clubhouse or some recent ones. The reality is, no matter the medium, the message needs to use storytelling if it's going to be effective. For the first few years of Go Narrative, I relied on my story interpreter role to help our clients. And it was then that I discovered Paul Smith's tools. I started using Paul Smith's CAR framework, context, action, and results, which he introduced in Lead with a Story. Great book, by the way. And it was really, it helped me bridge the mental gymnastics of entertainment frameworks versus business frameworks. I liked it, but it wasn't quite enough. But I did at least have found the first story structure or framework that wasn't explicitly tied to entertainment frameworks, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. It did, however, inspire me to forge ahead and to crystallize my processes and frameworks and ideas. And in the end, my realization was quite simple. Stories are like salt. Salt is elemental. Without it, food is bland. Some people even think it's great on watermelons. I'm not quite sold on that yet. But you want your message to be tasty, don't you? Stories make everything tastier. I needed a tool as simple as salt, something anyone can add to their marketing dishes. And you know what? None of these tools or channels or features matter if they're not tasty. Storytelling is an essential element, just like salt. So don't prioritize the channels, prioritize storytelling, then the channels. Now, some of you may be thinking, but too much salt is a bad thing, Matthew. Yes, it is. Just like the entertainment story structures, they bring too much salt to the business storytelling table. So to avoid that, I prioritize focus on three things. Focus on the customer as a hero, demonstrate an overcoming of challenges, and focus less on the product. If you do anything, make sure you do this. This focus, along with my story interpreter role, were what we used for our initial sales presentations, websites, and other content, such as these examples. Before we knew it, we were creating strategic narratives as a part of our strategic messaging foundation, go-to-market playbooks, accompanied by value props and positioning frameworks, personas, buyer journeys, and content strategies. Finally, I was feeding a family of 4, despite having shed the shackles of corporate America. The cool thing about this work, the personas and the positioning and the value stuff, was they're really components of business storytelling. So we're starting to find where this connection was. Our strategic messaging foundation work was ultimately that key that led me to unlock storytelling for business. And when our clients apply it, and when they invested in these playbooks, they see real results. A mid-size IT services firm saw consistency and unity across marketing, sales, and their consulting delivery. A corporate client of ours saw a 40% increase in registrations for their event series. And another saw campaign landing page improvements of inbound and search. Impact was over almost 4%, in fact, increase the page views, and just over 7 times, increase in page actions. That's a huge uplift because of storytelling. The whole point of these frameworks, it was to craft a useful tool that we could use with anyone and that you could ultimately use yourself to help you and your product stand out, to make what you say and do interesting. I love helping our clients find a way to better connect with their customers, and I found it through storytelling. It's really no surprise, right? Our brains are wired for it, our society is built on it, and the good news is you don't need every single latest social media platform to find success. Whatever platforms you're using, you need storytelling to make it better. It's that secret that I'm about to share. In fact, it's 3 secrets. So one false belief that we see is storytelling may be a powerful way to communicate, may be entertaining, but it's too hard to apply for business. Every time I try, I get wrapped around the axle on the hero's journey. It's too complicated and too much lift. I have so much to worry about. I just can't even do this. So that leads to secret 1, a quick and easy hack to increase profitability without learning all of the nuances of entertainment storytelling. So another false belief we hear is, okay, I'm sold on storytelling. I understand that simple framework, but I can't create stories that really work. My stories don't have heart. So many product benefits that I'm trying to get across, I can't find, let alone fit in realistic emotions that will really make the story interesting. Hence, secret number 2, a way to build and tell confident business stories that connect with the hearts and the minds of your customers. There's a third false belief we often see is, okay, I get it, but I just can't get the support internally. I can't show how these stories and this effort aligns to our business. I can't demonstrate how it's going to help all of our stories that we tell align as well. And so I'm really struggling to do that. That leads us to secret number 3. Tell the right story to connect your audience to your product and move your customers to act, and ultimately to get the support you need because you've shown how it deeply connects to the business. Let's talk about secret number 1. Take out your pen and paper because I'm going to walk you through in a few moments our 3D story framework. So I seek to avoid reinventing the wheels, right? We talked about that, and we talked about my hunt for existing wheels, all these fascinating frameworks born out of hundreds of years of analysis of literature and so forth. In fact, that's what the hero's journey came from, is a reverse engineering of literature. All of those, overcoming the monster, save the cat, Pixar had one. But again, these were for entertainment, because books and movies are just artifacts of what storytelling is really all about. I couldn't find any how-tos for applying storytelling and marketing in a repeatable manner, right? I couldn't find that wheel I was looking for. And I wanted a wheel that worked for a repeatable application of storytelling in business. Remember, those movie and story models, those movie book story models can be really quite detailed, right? Joseph Campbell's like up to 17 steps, phrases like rising and falling action, just too much for you as a busy professional. And as we mentioned with Made to Stick, we're all subject to the curse of knowledge, and the curse makes it harder for non-experts to understand what we simply get. Storytelling is no different, and I was running the risk of getting sucked into that curse of knowledge, and I want to help you avoid the same. I knew that I had to keep forging to unlock this secret. Besides, if I could develop frameworks that we could use, then I could help you use them as well. But forging frameworks can be tricky. Luckily, when I worked at Microsoft, I had the opportunity to create a patent for our customer engagement accelerator, which I created with Kelly Rigotti and Fred Studer. Creating a patent isn't easy. You need to be very detailed, the technical flow of information and all that, and it can get quite confusing, so much that you're trying to manage. But what brought it all together for me was looking at the patent through the lens of storytelling, through the eyes of our hero, through the eyes of our user. And I was lucky to have had this experience because it not only did it help me crystallize what I needed to do with our frameworks, it also was a really good example of how even the technical side of business can benefit from storytelling. So I use that to unlock the true power of story structures and to do it simply, right? That's key. The good news is you don't have time to do all this, go through all this work, but I've done it for you. So you don't have to worry about spending 9 years doing what I've just done. So the thing is, I did want to retain the interest and the entertainment value of the excitement, I should say, of the entertainment frameworks. There's value in that. So there was also this aspect. I wanted to create something that could help with strategy as much as it could with crafting campaigns or training sales team or creating content or crafting messaging. Because I truly believe that with the right framework, you can take your storytelling destiny in your own hands, even if you're not a natural born storyteller. And the right frameworks can help you apply it to business, marketing, leadership, product management, or even internal politics. But they need to be practical, useful frameworks. So where I live in Seattle, we're surrounded by water. The archipelago has like 170 islands, and my wife and I have fantasized about living on one. Recently, we saw a property go on sale on Vashon Island. So it checked a whole bunch of our boxes. So we packed the kids in the car, hopped on the ferry, and went over to have a look at it. It was a new construction, but it had issues. Sellers had run out of money, and it showed. There were issues all over the place, right down to the foundation, that created huge concerns for us. Houses are a lot of work. You got to take care of them, especially when they're 450 years old, like my parents' farmhouse was, built out of the stone of Stonehenge. But if the foundation is strong, it can last 450 years, especially if you're in a place where there's no earthquakes. But that house on Vashon was peppered with warning signs. It reminded me of my mission to simplify storytelling for business and to help business people benefit from it without being an expert, right? Because it made me think of having a good foundation, about being simple, about being a useful tool, and being easy to apply, right? And that foundational element of that. If you get your storytelling right, you don't have to worry as much about what channel you're using. We've touched on that already, right? Because the right framework can help you get attention, be heard, and drive action. Storytelling for action. Do it for internal alignment, pitching ideas to your boss, exploring product strategy, crafting product positioning, defining strategic narrative for your company, and of course, creating campaigns and messaging. And when you get the foundation right, you do really go beyond just the telling of stories. Campbell and Snyder wanted to help authors. I want to help you with storytelling in business. Your craft is your unique business. Your craft isn't storytelling or making movies. Even natural-born storytellers can benefit from structure designed for business to help apply it in a practical manner. And people should be able to enjoy living in a beautiful home with no worries about the state of the foundation, safe in the knowledge that it's well built. And these frameworks do that. By the way, that house eventually sold less than what it was going for in a market where everything was going for 20% up. So, okay, here it is, our first framework, the 3D framework. It's practical and it's straightforward. Let me make this full screen for you. So it helps you see your story from all angles. Nike's Just Do It inspired me, packing a whole bunch into just 3 words, packing stuff in a way that represents more than those 3 words. 3D stands for desire, difficulty, denouement. Bit of a fancy French word, I'll get to that in a second. In a nutshell, people, your hero, your customer, want something. There's a desire. But life isn't easy, and things stand in the way of getting that. Difficulty crops up, right? And then I chose that fancy French word, denouement, because it means the untangling of the knot. What a wonderful metaphor. How was it untangled? What was used to untangle it? What were the outcomes of that untangling? What results were found? In my story journey, I knew that there was this huge importance of contrast, of change, of transformation. And I also knew that every business is ultimately about transformation, about changing customers' lives, be it big or small. And if people could easily understand the why and the how of another's solution to such a transformation, then they could also be persuaded to follow the same path, which means buying from you, right? And that's why we designed the 3D story framework, to be deceptively simple, a rich microcosm of nuances, details, and context packed into 3 simple words so you can get going, much like Nike's Just Do It tagline. From all those years as a story interpreter, right, in business, I knew that if you pulled on the correct threads, you'd extract what was needed to construct a story. And a good story puts you or your customer at the center. These 3 words do just that. They tease the transformation, and it's presented in a way that allows you to see every single detail and to view it from all angles that you need to. It should come as no surprise that we use this 3D story framework every day in our marketing, in our own marketing, even our sales conversations to best understand our prospective clients. We use it to analyze them. For our clients, we actually use it for all sorts of things. Here's an example, landing page, above the fold copy that uses the 3D framework. We're using it for a video that we're creating for a client right now. And we use it as a practical tool to break down value propositions, to create train the trainer guides, to coach clients on how to use storytelling without the baggage of entertainment story structures. And while it might be true that we're all natural-born storytellers, it's also true that it's different spinning a yarn about somebody cutting you off on the motorway than it is to define the strategic narrative for an energy compliance company. The latter is a bit trickier. I love this quote from Ben Horowitz. Storytelling is important and it does take work, but we've created some tools to make that job easier for you. With the 3D framework, you have an easy on-ramp to understanding and applying storytelling. I'm excited at its simplicity because that means it's easier for you to remember and to apply. We found a way finally to make using storytelling more accessible to business people. Okay, great. So you have your story structure down. You're starting to riff out some stories, but stories need emotion, and we have to feel the story. Remember how I told you about that we developed a framework to help with this. Well, that framework is a story meat framework. And so we're gonna get into that now. So this might be sounding good, but you might be asking yourself, okay, so how can I apply this in a way that truly connects and moves customers to act? One thing we hear from folks is, they get the power of storytelling, but they struggle to really bring the head and the heart in as well, right? And they look at the entertainment frameworks, and it's all like call to adventure and crossing thresholds, all this complexity to get to this sort of head and heart of emotion. They want something simple. It's really no surprise that business people tune out all of this stuff, because it's just hard to understand if you're not an expert, and you've got to take time to do it, right? Let alone then applying it to your business and having to struggle with doing so. And, I experienced that as my time as a story interpreter. And initially, even with Go Narrative, I was worried that the stories that we were crafting wouldn't have that emotional punch. I agonized over it, and I really don't want you to agonize over it. When we delivered our first strategic narrative, I was on pins and needles. What would they think? Would they like it? What would they think of the metaphor I had chosen of this eagle soaring? Would all of that crafted to engage emotionally fall flat? Thankfully, they loved it. There is a magic feeling that I get from really zeroing in on a narrative metaphor that works, that connects, that resonates. So I was lucky enough that my grandmother lived in the same village as my parents in her twilight years. This meant I got to see her on my trips back from university. And on my trips back from university, I had some stories to tell her, because I struggled at university. Maybe it was my ADHD, maybe it was my dyslexia, maybe it was my bright, shiny object syndrome, but I found it difficult. One day on a visit back home, I stopped by my grand's for a cup of tea. Ain't no party like my nana's tea party. Some of you might get the Flight of the Conchords reference here. Matthew, she said, if degrees were easy, they would hand them out after A-levels. A-levels are the last sort of 2 years of high school in the UK, equivalent of the USA. But she was right. It made me think back to that forging story. And no, I didn't spill the beans to my gran about my mum in the smithy. I kept my gran's comments in mind, though. Nothing worth working for is a handout. And if I could do the hard work, like forging these frameworks for you, I could get you to story success more quickly, but give you something that wasn't just a handout, but a useful tool. Entertainment story frameworks have a highly detailed structure. And the problem I see with that is, if you're trying to go through all that structure, you can get lost, you can struggle to check all the boxes, and ultimately not use it. And then in business, this distracts from something that's essential that you need to get to, and that is the emotions. It was during the early days of COVID that this really came home to me. The right emotions in business stories really became so poignant. I was doing my best with the rest of the planet to keep calm and carry on. And I started to go on the hunt for ways to ensure that we respected the emotional landscape of the time, which still continues. So let's talk about the emotions for a second, and their effect on storytelling and effect on everything. So our family loves Star Wars. Originals, prequels, sequels, toys. We have more Star Wars Lego than you can shake a stick at, and Rogue One's probably my favorite recent movie. I even met George Lucas twice, but that's another story. Ping me if you want to hear it. I remember reading an article about the lightsaber battles in Star Wars and how the actors had to practice, because for most of them, lightsaber battles, sword battles, were something they weren't used to doing. Each character brought their own inimitable style to the sword play. It wasn't just parry, block, and slice. There was an art, an emotion to it, and each character was different. Christopher Lee, who played the character Count Dooku, for him, swordplay wasn't new. In fact, he was acting and doing swordplay before many of us were born. Here he is in 1973's The Three Musketeers. So in his case, his classic, elegant style was integrated into his Star Wars character. To breathe life into a story, you must infuse technique and science with character, art, and emotion, just like Christopher Lee breathed life into Count Dooku's lightsaber battling style. The place to start is by asking, what are the truths about the fundamental transformation that your customer is going through? Put yourself in their shoes. Now, the good news is that I've created a way for you to quickly add emotion into your business stories. Better yet, you don't have to be a creative literary genius or movie master to do so, because we created the story meat method for you. you can pull out this framework and use it to infuse emotions into your stories. It's your iceberg hack to bringing those emotions in. Morals, essential emotions, and truths. What it enables is a quick way to connect to the things that your audience cares about. Morals shape and guide behavior, culture, office locations, affiliations, donations, even collaboration culture within a company. Emotions ooze out of all business interactions: elation for success, fear for career snafus, excitement for ideation and collaboration. Truths frame up a business. Things are just a certain way sometimes. And this can be affected by the industry, the founders, the location, country of the headquarters, and so forth. When you hold something dear, think about your emotional response when it's threatened by a transformation. You can use the story meet method to meet your customers where they are. If you don't understand what moves people, you can't craft things that result in action. When you use the story meet method, you will do that. You will make sure that you include those emotions. And you don't need to maintain all the steps of the hero's journey to do where. You just need to remember to meet your customers where they are. Morals, essential emotions, and truths. Just start pulling at the thread with the story meet method, and you will unravel the complex cardigan of emotions in no time. So getting emotions in right in your storytelling builds empathy, which ultimately leads to engagement. I'm so excited to be sharing these simple frameworks with you so you can unlock the power of business storytelling. There's no greater feeling of success than when we impact people's lives and businesses with this work. Like Hannah from Am Plus said, this quote is just the sort of thing we live for. Helping people and businesses have this type of success is literally what gets us up in the morning every single day. So remember earlier when I told you about the framework we developed to help align your stories to the business, to get the support that you needed, to make sure your stories were aligned as well. Remember all that good stuff? So that's what we're going to talk about now. And it's our TRIPS storytelling methodology. So around about the time I was looking for all these frameworks, I was coming up short. I just wasn't happy with what I was finding. A quick Google search about storytelling shows plenty of people explaining storytelling and how it works, even the why of how our brain works with story. There's articles out there about that. But there's precious little about the why of storytelling, let alone through actual stories. Seriously, go and Google storytelling. Hit I'm lucky. You'll probably land on this HubSpot article. Save it for later. Now, not to throw HubSpot under the bus. They've got a ton of great content, by the way. But when you read it later, you'll notice a few things. Not only is it not structured as a story, there isn't a story to be seen anywhere in it. I'm sure you've realized by now why I've gone on this mission, and I've got a lot more work to do if I'm going to get everybody on board, but we've created the tools to help you with that. The power of story goes far, far beyond the content of storytelling. We use it to shape the world. I remember in January 2017, my wife and I were sitting on the sofa talking about what to name the company. And we decided on Go Narrative for two reasons. Go, because it was about action. It's about business. It's about results. And narrative, because it's more than just stories. It's not just about storytelling. It's not just about one story. It's all the stories of your customer. It's the stories of your employees. It's the story of your business, of your customers' businesses. And understanding that and finding a way to structure your communications, your messaging, your campaigns, your interactions, your sales trainings, your partner readiness, all of that in a way that is as engaging and drive action as possible. It's not just about storytelling. This is an essential thing to remember. The story meet method was great for bringing emotions in. The 3D story framework was great for structuring and telling stories quickly, but it's still not just about storytelling. Narrative is about the big picture. And I had two fundamental questions. Firstly, what was this golden thread that tied everything together? Which led me to an even more profound question. How do you even know what story to tell? Right? The story that matters the most for your business. How do you figure out how to tell that? How do you figure out how to construct it? And then how do you actually go and tell it? In my early days of solving the business storytelling problem, I became hooked. I spent much time geeking out on storytelling. You might recall how I kept running into problems applying it and kind of playing that interpreter role. I remember trying to get my general manager to remember the stages of the hero's journey. It didn't go well. I don't recommend it. Don't do it. You can almost feel the curse of knowledge, can't you? Most business people are just simply too busy to remember all this stuff. But you can if you have the right frameworks, and then you can apply them to marketing, sales, partner events, and even your office politics. And you understand the power and you want to use it, right? And you want to make sure it's aligned to your business, and you want to figure out how to get going with this and get going aligning it to your business. And this is really where the storytelling paradox manifests. What's this paradox you talk about, Matthew? Well, the paradox is a simple truth that storytelling isn't just storytelling. The driving force that results in the telling of stories is how our brain works, and precisely how our brain works in relation to society. I love how Will Storr talked about it, getting along and getting ahead. And the paradox doesn't end there. Even with this thing that's so natural, salt simple, that we can just sprinkle on things, even with that, it's so tricky that business people are constantly spilling over the salt of storytelling and failing to apply it into business, and ultimately drowning customers and even employees in the curse of knowledge. And just as you start to get storytelling, you find that you start to get sucked into the curse of knowledge with storytelling. And that's one of the disadvantages of trying to learn the breadth and the depth of all of those entertainment frameworks. You literally will get lost. I love how Mike Maddox talks about you can't see the label from inside the jar. And ultimately, it also makes me think of the Buddhist practice I learned through meditation, the idea of beginner's mind. I want to help you retain that. And so for example, our very first client was a small technology business based in California. We were crafting their strategic messaging foundation, including their narrative, value props, positioning, and so forth. I was still kind of playing the story interpreter role at the time. But if you think about your favorite movie, right? Think about whatever your favorite movie is, multiple stories that happen with a movie woven together into the ultimate narrative of that film. Again, these are just artifacts. And there's often a moral or a metaphor that comes out of it. For example, in The Wizard of Oz, the narrative was that one's true purpose is found within oneself. There's no place like home, and Dorothy was there all along. The stories of the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion all supported the narrative. They had what they sought all along. And in business, when you're prospecting for this, understanding the stories of employees, customers, partners, founders, all of those inputs and the research, you can identify how the transformation ultimately relates to people, and then you can start to work to connect a narrative to that. And again, this is more than just storytelling. The biggest problem, unfortunately, is that a lot of people still see it as for entertainment, maybe the occasional sales presentation, but they don't see it as something that's deeply, deeply connected to the business. What if you had a way to guide the leadership team through the narrative elements in a language they understood, demonstrate how storytelling connects to your business, use these tools to actually create strategies, content, messaging, and engagements that drove action without having to memorize narrative structures and story structures created for entertainment? That's what the TRIP storytelling methodology is all about. So you might be familiar with this quote. I love it. And it's how I feel when we start applying our narrative frameworks. It's a magical feeling of getting to the goal, not just more quickly, but with accuracy in a repeatable manner. Plus, it's in the language of business, not entertainment. We're also able to use this framework to X-ray businesses, to understand what makes them tick, to understand what's going on in their market and how they're interacting with that. Because all of that needs to be the source of your narrative that will then become the source of the stories you tell. Think of a brick wall. Now, imagine a wall not as multiple bricks, but as one single tall, thin wall made of fired clay. Such a wall is never made. Why? Because it's weak. If you have multiple bricks connected by mortar, it reinforces their strength, and it's to do with how the forces of each of the bricks acts on each of the others. A narrative is like mortar. It holds all your stories together, and together they're more robust. You undoubtedly have an idea of how you can help your clients. What we want to help you do is make sure that you're communicating that in a way that drives action. And all these tied together with a golden thread while framing how you help. When we untangled that knot in the denouement of 3D Story, we found out how a customer went through their story and found success. The fact is, your company's strategy is deeply linked to your story. As Ben Horowitz says, in good companies, the story and the strategy are the same thing. And he goes on to say that the output of all the work that a company does ultimately becomes a story of the company. Therefore, a strategy without a story is an incomplete strategy. Is your strategy complete? So with the TRIP storytelling methodology, we have created something that you can use to ensure the stories have a common foundation, but also are deeply connected to your business. T stands for transformation. What change is going on in the world? What change is going on in governments, people, in your customers themselves? How are these changes affecting your customer? This is the ultimate why of what you're doing, whether it's a new marketing campaign or a new product. Reasons are the reasons to believe. And this is a head and a heart. We've got the facts and the trends of the head and the heart, the aspirations, why people want to go on this journey. Innovation, this is your secret sauce. It's not everything you do, it's the magic you bring to the table. Could be a specific product capability or feature, or it could be something cultural about, for example, customer service or customer experience. P is about problems. That transformation introduces problems. When you try and tackle the transformation, there are problems getting going. As you start tackling it, there's problems that crop up along the way. And then stories. What stories represent the transformation? What stories can you tell about the reasons to believe, the aspirations that people have? What stories can you tell about why this innovation came about in the first place? What stories can you tell about existing customers who have overcome the challenges that you can share with other companies? This really is what happens naturally. Not all the time, but it can, especially when you think about an entrepreneur who comes up with an idea, who then leads a company to go and implement something. That passion, the story, the narrative is a part of everything that they do. On the flip side of that, an entrepreneur might have too much noise about what their story is and not be clear on what that story is. And for an established company, especially an enterprise, you can become disconnected from what that story is, and you can leave that on the table and not have that travel throughout the organization. So it does happen naturally, doesn't always, but it can. It's why unicorns exist. But if you don't tackle it intentionally, you are rolling the dice. And I actually didn't even invent this methodology, really, when I think about it. I discovered it or uncovered it. This is the state of things, but you have the opportunity to harness it because of these frameworks that we put together for you. It's not too, I looked at what Joseph Campbell did with analyzing literature and standing on the shoulders of these entertainment story structure giants, but then looking at business and looking at the details of business and analyzing business like Joseph Campbell analyzed storytelling to find a way how we could actually bring storytelling structures to business rather than those entertainment structures. In doing so, we can codify it. If we codify it, you can use it time and time again. And remember, like I said, it can happen naturally, but it's not guaranteed. You can always roll the dice, but you don't have to. You no longer have to cross your fingers because you've got the tools to do so. So when you craft narratives with the TRIP storytelling methodology, you'll frame your strategy for transformation and how it affects the market. You'll harvest the proper inputs for your stories. You'll build that golden thread that ties everything together. You'll break down the topic to put everything in context, to understand the drivers and blockers of your audience, to connect with empathy, to show how you can take them to a promised land and to realize the transformation for themselves. Then with our 3D story framework, you can build the stories. You can use that to create the content in a way that is consistent and repeatable. Bring in the story method to meet your customers where they are. You'll then make sure that your stories have got the emotions that are engaging. And these are the heart, the North Star of everything that we use to help maintain an outside-in focus, to bring consistency for our clients and repeatability to everything we do. And when you take these things, you can go and do that yourself as well. It's the foundation for our strategic narrative work. In our business, we use this both internally and externally, the TRIP storytelling methodology. Internally, we use it to shape our own narrative and guide the work that we do and stay honest. Externally, we use it to x-ray our client businesses, to understand everything that they're dealing with, to break the problem down. And that sets us up on the path to then be able to use those inputs to actually then go and tell stories. For example, we'll run a workshop with a client to extract all their inputs for each of the TRIPS elements. Then we'll test, research, and expand on those concepts. We use it to identify cultural and meta narratives that can be used as a narrative metaphor to accelerate understanding. These frameworks and metaphors are our one ring to bind them all, along with the foundation, the stories with our 3D story framework and our story meat method. You can use all these to craft your strategic narrative. And customers have achieved things like 40% increase in registrations for their events by implementing our complete approach, as I touched on earlier. This is our golden thread. After we applied our frameworks, we saw deals 10x the size. These engagements included multiple storytelling services, and of course, our favorite deliverable of all, which is the strategic narrative. And I am thrilled. My journey with storytelling went from stories and heroes' journeys to brain science and the cogs of society, learning that storytelling wasn't just the telling of stories. And I learned that there's a process that fundamentally we could harness about how our brain and society works, how we communicate, and to package that up in a way that you can use to problem solve and really connect and drive action with your customers. It really fuels our lives and the business we run. I also learned how to align narratives to the business to create a narrative that connects to human understanding and the world in general to those technologies, those wonderful services that you're developing and applying. And I learned how to apply narratives intentionally to craft stories that get people to act. Really, you are now set up to have the keys to unlock the secret to storytelling success for business. You'll create energy, interest for your program, your campaigns, even your storytelling initiative itself. You will build alignment and get people on board. It's on that energy that you can then engineer large-scale, meaningful narratives and campaigns that convert and trigger the right mix of emotion release at scale. This is storytelling for action. So let me ask you a question. If you follow what I shared in secret number 1, started quickly crafting and telling compelling, practical business stories, and then you did what I showed you in secret number 2, made sure those stories had heart and moved customers to act. And then you use secret number 3 to tie all your stories together, create alignment with your stories and with your stories to your business. Do you think you could drive more demand and accelerate your sales pipe? How many of you are feeling excited right now? Lots, right? Fantastic. How many of you feel like you're drinking from a fire hose? Probably the same amount, right? I get it. It's impossible to cover everything in a 60-minute presentation. You know a lot about your brand, your products, and all the features it uses. What your job now is to do is really to take those next steps. And my job in this presentation is to help you take the next steps. So stories are the same. Show how to take the next steps. Show how to take the action. Storytelling for action, right? And I want to help you do that. If you can take these ideas and run with it, it's awesome. If you need help, we're here to help. So that's why we're launching the Storytelling for Action program. And here it is. You can be one of the first people to get access to Storytelling for Action by signing up at this link. All you need to start applying storytelling to businesses here. 6 playbooks, a 12-part course covering all the elements of the playbooks and our frameworks, lifetime access to our clinic, a bonus customer advocacy pack. Our mission is to help you harness the power of storytelling for business without relying on entertainment storytelling frameworks. Storytelling for Action is for you if you're an entrepreneur or a marketer or an executive who's looking to get attention, be heard, and ultimately sell more. So thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited for Storytelling for Action. I'm so excited to share it with you. And I'll stick around for a few minutes to answer questions or fire up the chat over here to see what the questions are coming in. Don't worry if you can't think of any right now, just reach out after the fact. We're back here every week, most weeks, to talk through this again, so you can come back and get a refresher, learn about the frameworks again, start applying them yourself, and obviously to ask questions. So who got some questions coming in? What do you mean by storytelling or not storytelling? Okay, what do we mean by storytelling? What is storytelling versus what's not storytelling? Storytelling, what we mean by that is using the structure of story to deliver information that is memorable and actionable, really driving that action. Do I need to become a great or even a good storyteller? No, you don't. Don't worry about it. When you have the right tools, you can be the most introverted anti-raconteur in the world and still create narratives and content for your business that is story-driven, results in employees, partners, and prospects taking action. So no, you don't have to actually become a great storyteller. Use these tools. You can tap into this power without actually having to become a storyteller yourself. However, I believe you'll end up becoming a better one because of this. And let's see, well, Okay, we've got time for one more question. Got to wrap up. How do I get the more technically inclined to care about storytelling? Use what I've shared to mindfully craft a story to take them on a journey. Use the 3D framework and the Meet one primarily for this effort. Check out we have a recent blog on taking your team on the journey. We talk about the Aristotle approach, and we've got a new blog coming out as well about parables and fables with some real business parables and fables in that you can use. And then, yeah, I mean, when somebody gets into the kind of, I just need to know the features and the price, they're far enough down the journey to be taking the action. And you need the tools to do that, right? And you need the technical information, the pricing information. But are you ever going to get people there if you don't use storytelling? It's not going to happen. So you've got to cover all your bases, right? And some bases may be covered. Doesn't mean all of them are yet. So brilliant. Thank you so much for coming. This has been really fun to go through all of this with you. Absolutely excited to hear from you. Reach out. Let us know what questions you have. And we are just ready to rock and roll with you and to keep working on storytelling for action and to use storytelling to drive the type of action that we really want to use to create change, connect our products and our services to people, and to help you do all of that and to create change in the world. So thank you so much for coming. Really excited, and we'll see you next week. Stop by. Cheers.